the chapter I chose to discuss is about summer vacations, which is a concept known to most nations of the world, but it has a special meaning to the Egyptians. Egyptians even have coined several words based on the summer season, which is safe. An English or Frenchman would speak of the summer season as just taking a holiday. The Egyptians call this holiday tasif, which is summer holiday making, and specifically spending the summer at the seaside. Egyptians even have a special noun for people spending the summer this way. They're known as musayifin, and they also have a word for the summer breeze, meaning literally the breeze that comes from the direction of the sea, known as bahari. Summer vacations shed an interesting light on important changes that have taken place in Egypt's class structure. For example, before the July 1952 revolution, newspapers and magazines were often full of reports about which rich families have gone to Alexandria and what Alexandria is doing to prepare for these summer visitors. So all the fuss revolved around the minority that Nasser referred to as half of the 1% of population, of the rich population. As for the rest of the population, the great majority were peasants who rarely left their villages, and their villages were far away from the seaside. So they still praised the idea of wanting to search for the breeze and to find it. And the only breeze that was available to them was by the banks of the Nile, and that led to the Egyptian society referring to the Nile as the sea. They called the Nile the Bahr, which is basically sea in Arabic. And they called the real sea the salty one. So for the small percentage of Egyptians that went on holiday meant that they would go to Alexandria. However, there were two exceptions. The first exception was that a very small minority of the higher society would go to Europe. These were some of the rich families. Another exception was that some of them would go to Ras al-Barr, which was between the Mediterranean and the furthest point north of the eastern branch of the Nile Delta. So some families would go to Ras al-Barr because it was during the Second World War and they felt that Alexandria was threatened. And then came an adventurous Egyptian filmmaker in the late 1940s, and he attempted to go against the monopoly on people's affections that was held by Alexandria. And he produced a film in another town on the Mediterranean, and this town was called Marsa Matruh. He called his movie Shati al-Gharam, which basically meant in Arabic, or is the translation of the beach of passion. He featured a very famous singer called Layla Murad, and she was singing about the beauty of Marsa Matruh's air and water. When Egyptians saw this film, they had a strong reaction as they never heard of Marsa Matruh before. And at first, when Egyptians were visiting Alexandria, they would go to a small section of the city called Al-Raml, which means the sands in Arabic. And it was built by foreign communities who have come over the previous hundreds of years. So districts in these areas had very European names like Stanley, for example. And the districts kept on growing rapidly in response to the needs of summer holiday makers. But they were all outside like the working city of Alexandria, and where people used to live around their daily normal life throughout the year. A particular beach was more than 500 meters long, and it attained great fame and attention and was given the name of Miami. It was in Alexandria, of course, and it was undoubtedly the most attractive beaches there. And then over there, the government even built like small wooden huts, and they called them cabins, or kabayn in Arabic. People there were completely protected from any of the harassment or disturbance that could come from the lower class segments, as there was an entrance fee that most of the lower population could not afford to pay. Galal Amin then talks about his adventures when he used to go to Miami Beach for 2 or 3 months during the summer vacation. He talked about that he used to sneak in with his friends behind the security guard's back because his parents did not go to that beach. His father did not see himself as belonging to this kind of community, and of course, his mother could not even imagine being around all these half-naked people in her pitch black dress, which is the abaya, and her black scarf, black headscarf. And when his mother wanted to go swimming, she would go, but she would go wake up at 5 a.m. and take her maid, and she would go where the beach is completely empty, and the maid's job was to get into the water with her robe so the mother could cover up herself before coming out of the water, so she can ensure that no one sees her. So comparing the summer holiday then with the summer holiday now, or at least in the 90s, the summer season then was much longer than it is today. And they did not have this concept of going to the seaside on weekends like we do nowadays, or we used to do in the 90s as well, where people would go to the seaside during the weekend and return to the regular jobs on Sundays. They used to stay by the seaside for the full 3 months. And even the government would move their headquarters to Alexandria during these couple of months and then return after the holiday is over. Then immediately after the 1952 revolution, the government removed many of the barriers that prevented many Egyptians, specifically the lower classes, from reaching the beaches of Alexandria. And then suddenly panic started to reach to the upper class in the first few months, as and then many of the higher society people moved to beaches of Agami, which is 15 kilometers or so west of Alexandria, and it's far away, and it prevented the lower classes from reaching there, as because of the distance it required a private car to reach El Agami, so they ensured that the lower classes will not be able to reach them. Others even moved to a beach called Ma'mura, which was, I believe, close to the palace, and it continued to be the liveliest and the fastest growing beach near Alexandria until the end of 1960s. But the number of people who could afford an Alexandria summer holiday was growing until the 1970s, and more people started to move there, and the growing numbers looked for new places to spend their summer holidays. And by the time those who went to gain more money in nations of the Gulf returned in the 1980s, there wasn't enough place in the beaches of Ma'mura and Agami because they were all already full of people. So it then came the idea of building a whole new village, which is now known as Marina and was called Marina back then. It was a couple of 100 kilometers west of Alexandria and about 30 kilometers east of Alamein. And Marina was full of or surrounded by high walls and guards in order to prevent anyone from entering. There was a £10 fee back then, and no one could enter except if they had a connection with one of the marina owners inside. There were many similarities between Marina of the 1990s and Miami of the 1940s. The similarities between them was they both had foreign names, they had high walls, they tried preventing the lower classes from entering, and they also had an area where the high class or the elite of society could enjoy their summer vacations. But there were also differences between the 1990s Marina and the Miami of the 1940s. The differences was all linked to the technological processes that occurred over the past 50 years or so. Because the summer holiday makers in the 1990s, it was not enough for them to just lay down on the hot sand and enjoy chatting while sipping their beer. The boys and girls of 1990s until today want the motorboats or jet skis to show off the wealth of their family. So it kind of shifted to a more materialistic environment rather than simplicity that was back then.